have an hour, so I'm just going to get started. As you know, today is our brown bag webinar about volunteer training survey for spotted lanternflies. And if you have any audio issues or not hearing us, make sure that your Zoom audio is connected correctly. On the screen are just a few tips of what you can do. Make sure that in your lower left corner, you've got your audio settings on. And we also have closed captioning enabled for you to be able to read the captions. Really quickly, I want to go over some of Blue Ridge Prism's upcoming events. We've got a really busy spring and we're really excited about it and hope you will be able to join us for some or all of these events. On the 26th and 27th, we've got our online workshops, our nuts and bolts invasive plant workshops. The 26th is identification of invasive plants in the spring and summer. And the 27th is management and control of invasive plants in the spring and summer. Please join us. All of the information is on our website and you can register there. On April 5th, we've got an in-person workshop. So you can go ahead and get your hands in the ground or whatever and, feel and some of the tools that you'll be able to use and learn one-on-one with our invasive management specialists. And that's an invasive plant workshop at Rockfish Valley Trail in Nelliesford. Again, you can register for that on our website. This is the first time we're actually telling people about this in the public about this, but on April 13th, we've got a really special event coming up. We have an in-person evening with Dana Milbank, who is the Washington Post columnist. And recently, Dana bought property in Virginia and has been battling invasive plants and learning a lot about native plants and wildlife, and has really started to learn about it, and it's really hit a chord in him, and he's written several columns about it in the Washington Post. So I hope you can join us. This is a free event on April 13th. Pay what you can if you want. And it's in Charlottesville at the African American Heritage Museum. There's more information about that will be forthcoming very soon. And finally, on April 16th is our spring online quarterly meeting with the delightful Peggy Singleman. She will talk about native plants for your landscape. I hope you join us for that. It will be a really informative and wonderful meeting. Okay, today joining us will be our wonderful guest speakers, Lori Chamberlin, the Forest Health Manager at the Virginia Department of Forestry, and Katlin DeWitt, the Forest Health Specialist for Virginia Department of Forestry. Also on the call is Alexa Davis from VDEX, who will be able to help with answering some of our questions about control and coverage of the Commonwealth. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you take over, Katlin.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today. I'm just going to share my screen. And is that full screen for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, welcome. Thanks for being here. I'm glad to see such a great showing of people interested in learning about spotted lanternfly egg mass surveys and a little bit more about spotted lanternfly in general. My name is Katlin DeWitt. I'm the Forest Health Specialist. I'm going to be doing the first half of this presentation, and I'll be focusing on biology and identification of spotted lanternfly. And then halfway through, I'm going to turn it over to Lori Chamberlin, the Forest Health Program Manager here at the Department of Forestry, and she'll talk about the surveys themselves and how to do the surveys. So hopefully it'll be a really beneficial training for you guys today. And Lori and I are both based here in Charlottesville at the headquarters for the Department of Forestry. I am going to stop my video because the internet has been a little wonky here today. So just to make sure I can play like a video and you guys can hear me and there's no delays, I'll come back on at the end for questions, but definitely just want to make sure you guys can hear and see the presentation well as priority. So getting into it, if I can advance my slides, there we go. I want to start this presentation off with an image just to make us laugh a little bit before we get serious about spotted lanternfly. This insect is objectively a very striking insect. It's large and it's colorful. And sometimes, as we know, invasive species can be demure and less noticeable. So it is a very nice looking insect objectively. I have a biology or an entomology degree, so I like the way insects look. I'm a little weird in that way. But even I think, as you'll see photos of this, it is a very striking insect. Because it is so showy, and as we'll learn in this presentation, it's very prolific and gregarious. A lot of attention has been given to this pest on social media and in the news. And so some really funny and goofy memes and images have come out of this. But that's not why we're here today. We're here to learn why it's bad. So I'm going to go into what is spotted lanternfly and why do we care about it. This species is native to southeastern Asia, so it is invasive. And it's particularly native to China, Vietnam, and Bangladesh. It's kind of interesting because it was accidentally introduced into South Korea in the mid-2000s, where it became an agricultural pest, especially on grapes. And it's also considered invasive in Japan. So native to some parts of Asia, invasive in other parts, and then first detected in the United States in Berks County, Pennsylvania in 2014. However, research has now shown that it's probably been present in this area since 2012. So we're a little over a decade of having spotted lanternfly in the US. After spreading through Pennsylvania, it was detected in Virginia in 2018 up in Frederick County. So like the northern little tip, the hat of Virginia, as I like to call it. Since this detection in Virginia, it has now established in at least 15 states, as seen in the map on the right. And you can see that this goes all the way from Massachusetts to upstate New York, Michigan. Now we're in Illinois and way down in Tennessee and Kentucky as well. So kind of an impressive spread for a little insect in a little over a decade. In this map, the blue counties that you see highlighted, they have spotted lanternfly infestations. The red lines that are shown are where quarantines are in place. And the purple dots, which are a little harder to see, you have to get a little close to your screen. That's where individual spotted lanternflies have been found, but they haven't found a reproducing population or an established population quite yet. So we'll get into a lot of more of these details later. But this insect, kind of in a nutshell, why we care about it so much is because it causes damage to plants through feeding on the woody tissue. This will cause sap to ooze, foliage to wilt in times of heavy feeding, and branch dieback on species that are fed upon heavily and already stressed or now becoming stressed because of this feeding. Spotted lanternfly, it does have piercing, sucking mouth parts, which allows for the feeding on the branches to allow access to the sap. And then they take in too much of this sugary material, otherwise known as honeydew, and they must excrete it from their hind end, kind of similar to a giant aphid. So, you know, we've all parked our cars under a plant that has been fed upon by aphids. You get some sap kind of dripping down on you. Imagine that on a much larger scale with a larger insect. Additionally, they have a large host list. Again, I'll get into that in the next coming slides. And then other many factors make them a large nuisance pest. So there's a lot of reasons why we don't like spotted lanternfly and why it's a problem that it is spreading so much in relatively a short amount of time. So where is spotted lanternfly in Virginia? This is the most recent map of populations in Virginia that I could find from last November. Currently, it's found in 33 counties and 14 independent cities around the Commonwealth. 12 of these counties and 10 of these independent cities are quarantined. These are the ones that are shown in red in this map. And then another 21 counties and 4 independent cities have spotted lanternfly, but no quarantine in place quite yet. Lori will spend some time talking about this quarantine in her section. And again, we've got Alexa, if you have any other questions about VDACs and their quarantine. It is regulated by the Virginia Department of Agriculture, and I'll talk about that in a second. So they are in charge of the statewide the state quarantine that we have for spotted lanternfly. I also want to show this map because I just want to show you guys why it's important on why we want to be on the lookout for these undetected counties. And I think it's also kind of interesting to highlight the way that it looks like spotted lanternfly is spreading from Frederick County, that very tippy top county, and then it's kind of spreading down, and then now it's spreading east. And it seems to be following, in my opinion, roads like 81, which goes up and down, and then now we've got 64 east going towards the coast. So it does seem to follow major routes of transportation. So I mentioned that there's a large host list for spotted lanternfly, which contributes to its threat and its status as a nuisance pest. Since it is native to China, it has a strong preference for the invasive tree of heaven, otherwise known as Ailanthus altissima, which is a species I know that we all hate already. And now we've got another reason to hate it. While it does love the tree of heaven, it also has a broad host list with over 70 other plant hosts documented with this pest feeding upon it. So like I mentioned, it is regulated by the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services because it feeds on a number of economically important crops, such as grapevines, fruit trees, and hops, which we know are big industries in Virginia. From a forest perspective, it also seems to have a preference for some very important trees, such as walnuts, maples, birch. Again, a really large host list for this pest. The feeding preferences for spotted lanternfly, they start more broadly in their early instar stages. They'll feed indiscriminately on whatever they can find, really. The host range changes somewhat as they reach the fourth instar and as adults, but you'll still find them feeding on a variety of species. It was once thought that this species required a feeding on tree of heaven to reproduce. This has since been disproven, but they certainly do still have a preference for tree of heaven in these later life stages, but they do not require it to lay eggs. So they certainly do love tree of heaven, but they also seemingly love lots of other things as well. So again, that's a big issue when you're trying to combat this pest, and it has a huge host list. These next two slides are really just to hammer home how much of a nuisance pest this is. These insects are gross. So I mentioned I'm an entomologist. I have a pretty high tolerance for insects. We work with them a lot. And while they're nice looking insects, they're gross because they build up in big populations. You'll see a lot of them swarming on trees and heavy infestations. And also when they feed in these high numbers and they're excreting all of that honeydew, this honeydew can cover anything that's underneath these trees or these plants that they're feeding on, including the tree bark of the plant itself, foliage that is underneath this plant that they're feeding on, playground equipment, your porch, your back deck, your car, really anything that would be underneath any of these plants. The excess of honeydew can also lead to the growth of sooty mold. So if we look in this top left image of the adult, you see some black stuff covering that foliage. That's that sooty mold. This can impact plant vigor by reducing the ability for that plant to photosynthesize because it's completely blocking any of the structures that will, take in any of that sunlight. It's basically blacking out, like blackout curtains for that plant. It can also, all this honeydew can ferment, and sometimes under the base of trees that have been heavily fed upon, you'll see white ooze, and it really, really does stink. So you'll see that in that bottom left image. All that white stuff is just fermentation happening at the base, and it smells, I don't even know how to describe it. It smells kind of like an old old beer if it's been sitting out too long. It's not the best way to describe it, but it does stink. And the other thing, their nuisance status is exacerbated because it also, all this honeydew attracts a number of stinging insects like wasps and some bees and hornets that really enjoy that sweet honeydew. And so you might have an overabundance of these insects around these plants or these areas where the honeydew accumulates. So all in all, not anything you want to see in your backyard, your park or shopping center or anywhere there's a plant that these insects might feed on. So here's another photo, just kind of showing how gross they are. This tree on the left, it's got these oozing wounds. It's got some of that fermentation. It's black from the sooty mold growing on the bark. This is not what you want to see on the tree that's in your yard that you have out there to look beautiful and enhance the value of your home. We also on the right just have some of those high numbers of spotted lanternfly all grouped together. And you know, this really freaks out some people. They don't like to see a lot of insects congregating in one area sometimes. Okay, so getting to the insect itself, I think that they're pretty easy to ID as far as insects are concerned because we don't really have anything else that looks this unique. These insects are in the family Fulgoridae, which are mostly tropical plant hoppers. And the name lanternfly is somewhat misleading because none of them actually emit light and they're actually kind of weak flyers. So they do hop more to escape threats or your boot or a fly swatter if you're trying to squish them. We're going to start our ID process with the striking adults. So starting from the left, moving to the right with those images. The adults are about 1 inch long and they hold their wings about a 1/2 inch wide at rest, which is held in a tent-like position. So if they're just kind of hanging out on the tree, their forewings will kind of fold up in a tent-like position. If they're startled or if they're going to fly, they show and they'll spread their wings and they'll show this bright red hind wing, which is revealed. And you can see that in that second image on the left. These insects, after they have reproduced and laid their egg masses, they will go through 4 developmental instars, which are these developmental stages between molts. And that's the image, the third image on the left, which is the first 3 instars. They all look very similar. They're these black insects with white dots, and they've got this funny looking little like proboscis, this nose on the front of them. I've never seen anything that looks like that before, especially that nose. It's very telling. The first 3 instars, they look essentially the same. They just get larger as they molt. The 4th instar is where they start to look very different. They still have that funny little nose, but they turn this bright red color with black and white spots. Very showy, definitely stand out. And this is where that feeding preference starts to switch before they become 4th instar and adults. So really quickly, that's what they look like just while they're out and about and feeding. To kind of sum this up is like how the life cycle works within 1 year. So the adults are out in the end of summer through fall. They will feed, they will reproduce, and the females will lay egg masses. The egg masses are how this species overwinters. So they are in their eggs. They're covered with this secretion to help protect them from the elements. And they stay in this life stage from fall through spring. And then in spring, usually between mid-April to June or May, excuse me, you'll start to see the first instars hatching. And then they'll be around for the beginning of summer. As we get to later summer, the older nymphs, the 4th instar, they'll start to show up. And then at the end of summer, the adults will start coming out again, and the process will begin again. And you can have overlapping life stages. So sometimes you'll find 2nd and 3rd instar with 4th, and then later summer, you might still find some 4th instar with some adults. But it is a 1 year life cycle. And I think last year, Alexa can correct me if I'm wrong, the first instar started to come out in Virginia about mid-April. So we are coming up on that time frame in a few months when they will be out again, unfortunately. Okay, moving on to the reason that we're all here, these spotted lanternfly egg masses. The rest of my portion for this presentation will focus on spotted lanternfly egg mass ID. Why are we spending so much time on this, and why are we doing surveys for this life stage when it's very easy to find the adults and the nymphs because they are so showy? We're trying to spend a lot of time because this is probably, I think, one of the ways that they spread because they're very cryptic, laid on pretty much anything flat and immobile for at least some short period of time, long enough for the female to lay the egg masses. and they allow for the easy, undetected movement of spotted lanternfly. This is a good time of year to be doing this because the leaves are still off the trees. You can kind of look a little higher up on some of the structures and the branches to try and spot them. Otherwise, it's very easy to miss them if the foliage is out, if everything is busy in summer. So it's a good time to look for them. So these egg masses, they're roughly 1.5 inches long, flat and gray. I think it looks like someone stuck gum or some putty on a branch. Again, they can be laid anywhere, but they're typically somewhat protected or hidden from the elements, like on the underside of a branch or an overhang. In high populations, they are just laid pretty much anywhere. I think the females get a lot more indiscriminate when there's just a high density of them. One female spotted lanternfly can lay up to 2 egg masses in her short life, with each one containing up to 70 eggs in each egg mass. So that's a lot if you think about those high populations that I was showing you earlier. If each female can lay 140 eggs in 1 year, that's how they can build up very quickly in population. The female will lay each individual egg in rows, and then she'll cover it with a protective layer, which is kind of that gummy looking or putty looking layer. And as they weather or on older egg masses, you can see the eggs and whether or not they'll hatch. And we have a lot of pictures that I'll show you to help get that search image in your head. But the image on the bottom left shows kind of those individual eggs. That's an older egg mass where the putty stuff has kind of worn off. And you can see the individual eggs in rows. And then the image on the right shows a branch, and you can see there are 3 egg masses there. This one is more new. They're nice and gray. They haven't really cracked that much. But again, it's hard to see, it kind of just blends in with that branch. So here's just some variations of the spotted lanternfly egg masses. So we'll start, in this top left image, and that is an adult female, and she's actively laying an egg mass. So you can see underneath her, she's got these lines where the eggs are laid in rows, and she's covering it with that secretion. And so when it's fresh like that, it does look a little lighter in color, but it will darken over time. So if it's really fresh, it'll be a little bit lighter in color, and then it'll darken over time. Moving to the image to the right of that with the adult, we'll see another egg mass where you can see clearly the individual eggs, and it looks like she tried to cover some of it, but if it's later in the season or if it's her second egg mass, sometimes they just don't have the energy or have it in them to fully lay or fully cover it. So you might see sometimes some exposed eggs like that. Just another variation you might see. Going down to the bottom, we've got some older ones, starting with the left. You can see that's an older egg mass that has cracked and weathered some. Moving next to that, we've got older ones that have, again, they're not covered. I don't know if it's worn off or what, but I like these images because you can see that some of them have hatched. So if you look at the middle of some of them, you can see there's little black slits, and that means that those egg masses were from a previous year and they successfully hatched. Moving to the third from the left on the bottom, you can see that there are a bunch of new egg masses. There's some adults that are beside them, and there's some variation in color ranging from light, very freshly laid egg masses to some of the darker ones. And this is where they're just kind of a little more indiscriminate. It's probably a higher population in this area, and they're just laying them wherever they feel like on the main trunk of that tree. And then finally, the one on the right is, again, another hatched egg mass that is old. So it's really easy to tell if they've hatched or not, and if it's an older one. So if you happen to find any where you can see that it's hatched, that's important information as well. I really like this image because this was one that was shared to us by Virginia Cooperative Extension, and it was taken a day apart. So you can see the left image is from September 28th and the right image is September 29th. And they actually were able to match up the adult females with the egg masses that they laid. So you can see here we've got 5 adults on the image on the left. And then we've got the image on the right, and they went back the next day, and you can see exactly where those egg masses were. And again, they're not like choosy. If this was a good site last year, they're going to lay it again. If there's a lot of population, they're going to lay it, doesn't matter where. So you can see some of the old egg masses, and they're just actively laying new egg masses right on top of the old ones that have already hatched. So sometimes in areas where spotted lanternfly has been around for a while, you might see egg masses on egg masses similar to this. But I just think this is a really, really striking image showing exactly where they were able to lay those egg masses. I'm gonna see if I can get this video to play. This was shared to us by Mark Sutphin with Extension, and it's just a video he took showing a female actively laying an egg mass. So the quality is a little not so great, but you can see she's already laid the rows of eggs, and now she's covering it with that secretion. Again, it looks a little lighter now, but it will darken and harden over time. So it's just really interesting to, horrible and interesting to see this actively happening. And then these photos actually were shared to us over the weekend by one of our DOF foresters. He is restoring an old barn in his spare time, and he happened to find over 30 egg masses on the eaves of this old barn. So it just really shows how these suckers will lay egg masses on anything they can, and how hidden they will be, or how hidden they can be. So it's not always going to be on branches or trees or any sort of plant material. If there's anything flat, somewhat protected, and not moving long enough for them to lay an egg mass, they will do it. So the top image, we can see there's two kind of on that little rafter right there, and then the bottom image, there's a number of them on the boards that are helping to hold up the roof. So I think he said he did a lot of scraping that day just to squish some of these egg masses and hopefully not have any spotted lanternfly, or have less spotted lanternfly on his property. This handy fact sheet I really like to share. It was put together by Tree Dellinger and Eric Day at the Insect ID Lab at Virginia Tech. And it's just handy because it's different egg masses that they have had reported to them that kind of look similar to spotted lanternfly. So the two top left photos are actual spotted lanternfly egg masses, just as like a reference point. So you can see the very left photo, we've got the classic spotted lanternfly egg mass that's covered, maybe a little older, it's cracked, but nonetheless it has that putty over it. And then they've got the egg masses, or the eggs that are not covered, and you can see some have hatched in the image to the right of that. And so as we're going through these others, I just like to point out that the spotted lanternfly eggs, they're a little more elongated, they're not circular, and they've got these like vertical slits for when they've hatched. This will be helpful as you look at some of these other egg masses, which are not elongated like the spotted lanternfly eggs. The one that I think looks most similar to spotted lanternfly egg masses are the spongy moth, or the formerly known as the gypsy moth egg masses. And you can see that one, it's the kind of middle right photo, and they do have kind of the right shape and maybe look and texture of a spongy moth, or excuse me, a spotted lanternfly egg mass. However, they're hairy. They're more brown in color, and they're hairy. Spotted lanternfly egg masses will never be hairy. It's like a dried kind of putty, whereas these will have fine hairs. And also, if you were to scrape away some of that and see the individual eggs of a spongy moth, they're circular, not elongated. The other one that I think is very confusing and has fooled me, has fooled a number of our foresters, is the lichen on bark. So sometimes, especially if you're looking high up in a tree trying to do these surveys, you might see just some regular old lichen on a bark, but it does kind of, again, fit that color and that shape and that search image of spotted lanternfly. And so it can be deceptive and sometimes require a second take. The other ones, I could kind of see how they look similar, but we've got wheelbug egg masses. They're laid in a hexagonal pattern. and they're circular. Cankerworm eggs, they're also bunched together and they're circular as well, and they're not covered. So these won't be covered and they're circular. The Eastern tent caterpillar egg mass, it kind of just looks like goo around a branch to me. It doesn't look as exact as a spotted lanternfly egg mass, but again, it could be confusing. And then the Chinese manid egg case, this just looks like some spray foam that has been sprayed between branches. And if you crack it open, it's not gonna look the same as spotted lanternfly. So this is a really handy fact sheet. Again, you can find it online if you want to carry it with you if you're doing some of these surveys. But again, just something that might catch your eye as a possible lookalike for spotted lanternfly egg masses. And then these are some not spotted lanternfly eggs that have come to us through our surveys and some of our forester surveys. This image on the right, again, some of that lichen that is a little tricky. You definitely, I think that one we actually cut the branch down because we thought for sure it was spotted lanternfly and it was not. But it is very tricky. And then the other main lookalike, this image in the middle, this came from a survey at a state park. And it did look very suspect, but it turned out to be some of those spongy moth egg masses. So it was still good information to give park staff, but it wasn't spotted lanternfly. The bottom image, again, it's some of those, I think those were cankerworm, or they're circular, so they're not spotted lanternfly. And then my favorite, this top left image, someone found this on their car and they got very concerned, but it was just a little tree frog that was just kind of hanging out and waiting. So not spotted lanternfly, but this goes to show you it's easy to get fooled. These egg masses are very cryptic, and you know, it's always best to double check and, you know, make sure it is not spotted lanternfly. That's the end of my section. I'm going to turn it over to Lori now. So let me stop my sharing and then we'll turn it over to Lori.
All right, thanks, Caitlin. Go on here. All right, Caitlin, can you let me know if you can hear me and see the presentation?
Yep, I can see you and I can hear you.
All right, awesome. Hi guys, my name is Lori Chamberlin. I manage the Forest Health Program at the Department of Forestry. And so I'm gonna finish off the presentation today, and I'm gonna focus on how to conduct an egg mass survey and then how to send us that data. So I wanted to start with this graphic because it kind of emphasizes the importance of doing these surveys. You can see here it says that just one female spotted lanternfly adult can lay 150 eggs per year. They feed on more than 110 plant species. They've traveled over 200 miles by hitchhiking on vehicles. And many of those miles may have been because egg masses were laid on objects that were then transported to new areas. So that's what we're trying to prevent by doing these surveys. VDAX inspectors do a lot of surveys. You can see a map here of some of the surveys they've done. This is an old map. This came from a year or two ago. So we've had more detections since then, but it's just to give you an idea of how many surveys are currently going on. But it is always helpful to have more trained eyes in the field, especially because sometimes egg masses aren't found until the second or third survey at a site. You know, it could take multiple eyes looking in the same spot until an egg mass is found. So never feel bad about potentially surveying a site that has already been surveyed by someone else. And then also remember that negative data is important data. I think when we're looking for something, even if it's something bad like spotted lanternfly, we want to find it. So then maybe, you know, we get a little disappointed when we don't find it. But negative data is still very important. So please report all data to us, even if you don't find anything. It's still important and it helps us better understand the populations in Virginia. Also, at this point, spotted lanternfly could be anywhere within the state, so any survey is a good survey. All right, Katlin mentioned the Virginia spotted lanternfly quarantine earlier, and here it is. Hopefully you guys have seen this map before. Spotted lanternfly is a regulated pest in Virginia, which means that businesses in the quarantine area are required to obtain a permit from VDAX and inspect all regulated articles before leaving the quarantine area. And this is to ensure that the articles do not contain any life stages of the spotted lanternfly. So really this is an effort to slow the spread of spotted lanternfly to new areas. And you'll notice that this map is a little bit different from the distribution map of known infestations. So that map that Katlin showed earlier, where we know spotted lanternfly exists, has more colored in counties than this map. This map is just the spotted lanternfly quarantine. And that's because we have become aware of some spotted lanternfly infestations outside the quarantine since the quarantine was enacted. So this is the quarantine map right here. This map is important because if you are located inside the quarantine in one of these counties colored in, we no longer need reports of spotted lanternfly. We know that it's in those counties. We only need reports if spotted lanternfly is found outside the quarantine. Still good to look for this pest, even if you are in the quarantine, so that we can still prevent the spread and suppress populations, but we don't need that data. So for the rest of this talk, I'm going to talk about two different approaches to surveying. One approach for the folks living in the quarantine in one of these colored counties, and a different approach for those that are outside of the quarantine. Okay, so for those of you that are inside the quarantine, please keep surveying for egg masses, but you have less work to do because we are not asking you to report it. Look for egg masses on your property, especially on vehicles or items that may be transported to new areas. And if you find them, try to destroy them to reduce populations, and try to remove egg masses on vehicles so that we prevent the movement to uninfested areas. So this is really important since our goal is to slow the spread. We know there are spotted lanternfly populations in these quarantine counties, but we don't want to move those populations to new counties. But because we know they already exist in these counties, we don't need you to report your survey results. So the rest of this presentation, unfortunately, may not apply to you all. Because in a little bit, I'm going to talk about how to actually report for those that live outside these counties. All right, so for those of you that are outside the quarantine, we do want your data. Please send us your data. But as volunteers, please only do these surveys on your property and public land. Please do not trespass on private property. And we would like you to report your data using a Survey 123 form, which I will explain in a bit. Where should you look for egg masses? We suggest looking at host plants. So this pest feeds on a large list of plants, but we'd like you to focus on tree of heaven, black walnut, and red maple. Those are the trees that really seem to attract large numbers. You can look on the undersides of branches and branch crotches and at swellings. High in the tree with binoculars, the problem with spotted lanternfly is that they can lay eggs anywhere on the tree, even way up in the canopy where it's hard to see. So if you have binoculars, definitely bring those out and scan the entire tree. And also pay attention to vines growing on the tree, such as poison ivy, bittersweet, and grapevine, because they often lay eggs on or next to vines in sheltered nooks and crannies. In addition to trees, check out anything outside with smooth, flat surfaces. So this includes rocks, trailers, train wheels, RV wheel wells, old rusty metal. They tend to really like rusty metal, and really anything outside that hasn't moved recently. So now I'm going to try to show a clip from a video so you can actually see some egg masses on a tree. I think just the more images and videos you see, the better your search image will be when you guys are out there doing these surveys. So let's see if I can do this.
We're looking at more spotted lanternfly egg masses. Again, we're in a maple tree here in Winchester, Frederick County area. This cluster of egg masses, there's actually 3 separate masses there. 2 are fresh. They've been laid this fall, the September timeframe of 2020. This one in the center is an old egg mass from the previous year. The coating has worn off of that. The eggs hatched back in late April or early May, and the nymphs have emerged and are providing us our current adult population. So if you see egg masses like this on whatever it may be, plant material, a tree, again, we were talking about them as hitchhikers, and they can move on equipment, vehicles, materials that have been stored outside, and you would want to actually, they can be scraped off into rubbing alcohol or hand sanitizer, but I honestly find it just easy to come along and I will smash them with the back of my fingernail, and that renders them dead and no longer viable, and now they will not hatch out in the spring. All right, so some additional shots here. Spotted
All right, so that was just to give you some more images of exactly what we're looking for. Again, Katlin showed a lot of great pictures, but these are just some more photos to emphasize that they really could be anywhere. Stones, logs, tree branches, outdoor structures, but really focus on kind of protected areas. So I want to emphasize that any survey is a good survey. We really just want more trained eyes out there looking for spotted lanternfly. But if you are able to pick and choose, here are some high-risk sites that you could prioritize. Places where distribution occurs, where goods are coming and going. Rest areas or truck stops, camping or RV parks, gas stations, ports, railroad tracks, big parking lots, popular hiking trails, like maybe trailheads at state parks, and then focus on area with a high concentration of tree or heaven. But again, as volunteers, please stick to either your personal property or public property. We are not asking anyone to trespass to do these surveys. Okay, so again, if you are inside the quarantine, please do surveys, but you don't need to report anything to us. You are outside of the quarantine, here's how you can report your survey data to us. We're using a Survey 123 form. So you can see the link here, and QR code. Both those links and a QR code will take you straight to the survey form. Ideally, this is done in the field on your phone, like while you're doing the survey. But if that's not working out for you, or you just rather wait till you get home, you can also enter the data on your computer once you're back at home. If you are at home on a desktop, your location will probably not autofill, so you'll have to have an address or a GPS point from the actual survey location to enter. And I wanted to let everyone know that the survey is currently open now, but it will close on March 31st. We just don't have the capacity to maintain the survey after that. So this kind of walks you through how to submit that data. This is the survey form that you'll see. And first, you'll enter your name, your email address, and your agency. There's a little drop-down menu there. You all will probably all be volunteers. You'll enter the site name. This doesn't have to be an official name, just something that helps you remember what it is. It could be a rest area, it could be my backyard, the name of a gas station. You'll enter the host, plant or structure surveyed. And again, this is a drop-down menu. I think the selections are tree of heaven, grapevine, transport vehicle. There's a few there. And we got that list from VDAX. It's from a form that they use for their surveys as well. You'll choose what you're surveying. Then you'll enter the pest status. Did you find spotted lanternfly? Positive, negative, or undetermined. So you would only select undetermined if you think it could be an egg mass, but you're not really sure. So for example, if you see something way up in the canopy of a tree that looks like an egg mass, but maybe also it could be lichen. This has happened to us before many times. You could just put undetermined there. Enter in how many egg masses you found. If you found 0, enter 0. And then any comments at the bottom. You don't have to leave comments, but it could just be information that you think we might need. Like, are you seeing tree of heaven, damage to tree of heaven? Or maybe you could clarify exactly what you were surveying. But again, that's not a required field. The date and the time should be automatically updated, and then you'll need to enter in your location. So if you are out in the field on your phone, you should just be able to tap that map and it should take you directly to the location where you are. If it's not working, you can always either enter your address or you can use the zoom fields to zoom in to exactly where you are. And then at the bottom, you can upload photos. If you have found egg masses, you can take a photo and send those to us. And then you'll submit, and that'll be it. One important note, and I have an iPhone, so I've encountered this on my iPhone. I don't know if it's the same thing for other phones. But on my phone, I need to make sure that I turn location services on to enable accurate GPS so that my location so the app is able to find my location. And so to do that, I go to settings, privacy, location services, and select Safari or whatever internet browser you're using, and just make sure that location services are turned on while using the app so that the map can accurately find your location. All right, now I'm going to exit one more time and show you, just quickly go through what it'll look like if you are doing it on your computer at home. So basically the exact same thing. But we'll just do it together so you can see. So I am the surveyor. I'm putting my name here. Email. You guys will probably choose volunteer as your agency. I'm going to choose Department of Forestry. Site name is just going to be my yard. Here's the drop-down menu for hosts. So you can see we have Atlantis, fruit tree, grape, inorganic object, non-Atlantis tree, other organic, transport vehicle. So hopefully you can find the appropriate host in this menu. I'm going to choose Atlantis. And I did not find any egg masses on this survey, so I'm going to enter 0 here. Comments, none today. You can see the time and the date are already populated here. And I'm going to add my location. So normally you just press it, but it's not popping up because I'm on my desktop computer. So I'm going to enter in where I am. So this is our work address. You can see it takes me directly there. I am going to though move the pin. The pin is right here over our building. Say I did the survey over here by the creek. So all I have to do to move it is just click where it should be. I move the pin, so it's got my correct location. I'm not going to add any photos because I didn't find any egg masses. So then I just submit. Great, your data was sent successfully. Thank you. Back to the presentation. All right, and then to wrap this up, I just entered some frequently asked questions that we've received from folks who have done this surveys in previous years. So I'm going to quickly go through these. The first one, what if I'm surveying on multiple hosts at one site? So you're at one site, but there's tree of heaven, there's grapevine, and there's vehicles. What host do I choose from the form? And so my answer to this is just pick one. maybe the one that is most abundant. If there's a ton of tree of heaven, pick that one, even if you're surveying other hosts as well. And then maybe in that comment section, you can just list other hosts that you surveyed. Another question was, how many surveys do I submit per site? Just one survey per site. Unless your property is very large. If you're surveying a very large farm, then you could potentially split it up and submit one survey, do one survey for like one half of the site and a second survey for the other half, especially if the hosts change. So maybe on half of your property, there's a ton of tree of heaven, you submit one survey there. On the other half of your property, it's more like just structures, like an old farmhouse or something, and you could do a second one for that. But in general, just one survey per site that you're submitting to us. Another question is, I submitted a survey as negative, but then I found an egg mass a few days later. So that's fine, just submit a second survey for the same site, and this time indicate the positive egg mass detection. And then the final question is, this survey form just isn't working for me. I'm sorry, I'm very sorry about that. We try our best, but if that's the case, if you just can't get it to work, just feel free to email your data to us, foresthealth@dof.virginia.gov, and we'll have that email address listed again. All right, so this is kind of a wrap up, just a reminder, if you are inside the quarantine, please do surveys, but do not report that data to us. If you find egg masses and you're inside the quarantine, just do your best to destroy them. That's gonna suppress populations and hopefully prevent those egg masses or those spotted lanternflies from moving to new areas. If you are outside the quarantine, when you do your surveys, we would love for you to submit that data to us using the survey form that we just went through. And again, positive and negative data is important. I also wanted to mention that UF staff are going to be monitoring submissions over the next couple months. And so we'll be looking at all the data that you submit to us, but we will only reach out to you if we need clarification with something or if we have a question about something you've submitted. So after you submit your data, you're probably not going to hear from us. We will only reach out to you if we're confused or we need clarification from you. However, if an egg mass is found in a new location, either someone from DUF or REDAX may be in touch with you to try to come out and officially confirm it. And another reminder that the survey will close on March 31st. So that's the end of our presentation. Again, here is the link to the survey form, and there is our email address at the top. And then I also just wanted to thank you all so much for tuning in today. And thanks in advance for going out and doing these surveys. It's so important to have more folks looking for this pest and just getting more data. So that's it. I think we have some time for questions.
This is Natalie. I'm happy to read the questions. David had a question about a study that was done by USDA to corral and control spotted lanternfly. And the study was shown that the nymphs and adults were attracted to buzzing electrical power line. So he's just wondering if there's any updates on that and if you knew anything about the vibrations that they were attracted to.
I vaguely remember hearing about that study, but I do not know details or any updates. Caitlin, do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know any specifics about it. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Mira had a question or comment. She read that we're all overreacting. Why is that reaction out there?
Okay, so she read that we're all overreacting.
Yes. Why is that reaction out there?
Why are we overreacting? Okay, I think you could take this two ways. I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. Why are we overreacting, or why do some people say we're overreacting? And I'm going to focus on maybe why some people say we're overreacting. And I think that's because we're realizing that maybe this is more of a nuisance pest than it is a true forest pest. And so we're from the Department of Forestry, and that's really all we can speak on. I know it certainly has agricultural implications. Certainly wineries are having a harder time treating their grapes, and it's more expensive to treat their grapes. But in terms of our perspective at Department of Forestry, we're not really seeing it to be a true forest pest, more of a nuisance pest. And so that may be why some folks are saying that all this fuss about spotted lanternfly is an overreaction. Hopefully that was actually the question.
The next question is, have you been able to determine whether any predators to spotted lanternfly have surfaced as a helpful way to deal with them?
I know there is certainly work on that. Work on biocontrol is ongoing. Katlin and I will be attending the Spotted Lanternfly Summit actually tomorrow, where we hope to learn more about that and if there are any updates. But to my knowledge, they have not found an effective biological control agent yet. Katlin or Alexa, if you have anything else to add, please do.
I think the biocontrol is definitely evolving. And then I think in terms of other natural enemies, you know, there's always a lag time between when our natural predators and native predators will shift to some of these invasives. And I have heard of people seeing like praying mantids eating spotted lanternfly. Maybe some birds will try and pick them up. I don't think they like the way they taste. But, you know, I think some things are evolving and starting to pick at them, but I don't think it's anywhere near enough to control populations quite yet.
Okay, thank you. The next question was, does having a cracked or weathered covering on eggs affect their viability?
Having a protective layer on eggs affect their viability?
Cracked or weathered covering.
Oh.
I don't
answer that question if you'd like.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So in VDAX, we actually did a few little studies. And what we do with egg masses, we use an ovicide. So it's called golden pest oil. It's over 90% soybean oil, and we only use it on the egg masses. And so essentially what we do is we go out with our backpacks and we try and coat these egg masses with this oil to suffocate them. However, we've learned that and this is not foolproof, but we have seen that if you can kind of blast it a little more and get that coating off, that they're less likely going to hatch, because you're taking that coating off and then you're also exposing it to the elements, but then you're also covering it with an oil that's going to suffocate it before they can hatch. And this golden oil can be found, I'm pretty sure, at like southern states and stuff. It's nothing, no hard chemicals or anything like that, but that's something that we use for egg masses and find that when you can get the covering off, it's going to be a lot more effective.
Okay, the next question is, how much time between laying and hatching?
The egg masses are laid in the fall, and then they will be present in that life stage until spring, usually about mid-April, and that's when they'll hatch. So they'll spend most of the winter as the egg mass.
Is the direction of the spotted lanternfly egg mass always parallel to the direction of the branch? In other words, do they ever lay eggs sideways on the branch?
I don't know.
I don't know if I've ever paid any attention to that. I feel like it does not matter, just because they'll lay their eggs literally anywhere. But I also don't think I've ever paid attention to that. Alexa, you probably see a lot more egg masses than we do on a daily basis. Do you know the answer to that question?
I'm going to be honest, it's not something that I've paid attention to like a lot of people, but racking my brain, I'm not sure that I've ever, not that never, but they're typically going to be vertical, going along the branch or pole or whatever it's on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Natalie. I'm going to have to maybe one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up because it's 1 o'clock and people's lunchtime is over.
Oh.
Okay, so last question, Natalie.
Can neighboring states report as well? Is that helpful?
Yeah, sure. This survey is open to anyone. So yeah, anyone could do a survey, and it's certainly helpful to know what's happening along our state's border. So I would say go for it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, you guys, for your help on this. Once again, thank you, Lori and Caitlin and Alexa, for informing all of us about spotted lanternfly and all the unique and complex questions that we sometimes have. That's the end of our webinar for today. I know it was short, and I know I could have listened for a lot longer. Please feel free to email us if you have any more questions. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar in the next day or so with some additional resources that Lori and Caitlin talked about on their during their talks. On the screen, you'll see different ways that you can get more information about Blue Ridge Prism, our website. You can contact us. You can follow us on social media. We're always looking for volunteers. So if you're interested in volunteering with us, please contact us at info@blueridgeprism.org. And of course, please support our work if you feel so inclined. Donations help us present programs like this to you and the public. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you to Department of Forestry and VDACS and everyone at Blue Ridge Prism for helping us do this. We hope you have a great week. Take care.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.